Hi there, I'm Sean Osterlink. I am a therapist who uses ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy for my therapy practice. Let me adjust myself here. And I am going to be talking about just a tool that I made that I like to use for processing things from an ACT framework. And I'm going to walk through the steps here. I've got my iPad here, so I'm going to work through this, and you can see what I'm going to write on here as I'm talking. So I think that's cool. And so I called this an ACT values processing tool. And I'll probably upload the prompts to this video so that you could do this yourself. And there's so many different ways to journal and reflect and whatnot, but this is something that I came up with because I like to make handouts. I like to give handouts a lot when I'm doing therapy with people. I like people to have homework to do, something tangible to take with them and to think about after a session. And so we're going to start with what was a challenging situation that you faced? So let's say what was the challenge? What's a challenge that you've faced recently, for instance? Okay, what was a challenge? What would be something that we could put on here? Let's talk about the challenge of low motivation. You're just not feeling energized. You can't get yourself to do things that you know are important to you. Maybe you're not doing chores around the house. Maybe you're not looking for that next job that you want to get, but you're struggling with this low motivation. And let's say that's the situation. Okay, you can come up with whatever situation you want on here. And then I want you to think about, I'd have you think about, how do you get fused in an act? The fusion would be, how do you get stuck in the thought? Or what thoughts hook you? I often draw a cloud, like the cloud with a hook metaphor. I use this a lot. And so what gets your mind stuck on something? Today's a Sunday, maybe you're laying in bed, the day ahead of you, and you just don't feel like doing much at all. You can't bring yourself to do it. And so maybe there's thoughts going on there. I don't feel like it. I don't feel like it. I just can't. I just can't. What is your mind telling you? What is your mind telling you that's getting you stuck here? It's not worth it. What do you think? What gets you stuck in your mind to where you get stuck on the hook and it's convincing you that you can't or shouldn't do the next thing? Like, where are you getting stuck? And that thought, or maybe there's an emotion with that thought. You could say, what's the emotion there? Is there a fear? Is there a fear of messing up? Is there a fear of disappointment? Fear of letting yourself down or someone else? What else could be there? Maybe you just feel bored. Maybe you feel lethargic. What's the emotion there that might be hooking you? You just don't feel like you've got any energy. Maybe it feels very physical. So what's keeping you stuck there? Those are all things you could think about here. I'm going to lump that together. That's all part of the challenge too, whatever situation you're facing. And then what type of experiential control is showing up for you? Experiential control. And so the experiential control is how you try to control your experience, what you're trying to do to make you feel better in some way, what you're doing in response to that fusion, that hook that's showing up. What are you doing in response to it? Because the control and the fusion, they work together. Fusion, the EEC, experiential control. They're kind of like a tornado that just sucks you down into a spiral and keeps you stuck. They work together to keep you stuck. Okay, so the control in this case, let's say you're stuck in bed or on the couch and you're not feeling much motivation. There's all kinds of cognitions here telling you, I don't feel like it, I can't, it's not worth it. So whatever kind of negative self-talk is showing up, whatever kind of emotions are showing up with that, and then you're sitting there with it, and the control might be, it could be that just the couch or the bed feels good. Couch feels good to sit on. Okay, or feels good to lie in bed. Or how else could control show up? It could show up mentally within the mind, as it so often does. It could show up as I keep thinking about just what it is that I'm not doing with my day, what I'm not doing. Maybe I'm ruminating on all the things, maybe like overwhelmed by the number of things that I have to do today. It's just spinning through my head. The thoughts are just spinning. And that's the experiential control then, is that the thoughts just keep going through the mind as if I think about it enough, then that will somehow change something. Okay, so whatever the experiential control is, it's like picking up a shovel. Here's my drawing of a shovel. And that looks like a little heart. And you're just digging the hole down. And you just keep digging with whatever you're doing as the experiential control. Maybe you're feeling bad about yourself and you're ruminating on this. You keep thinking about how disappointed you are in yourself, that you can't get yourself to get up and do something. Maybe you're depressed and you're ruminating on how maybe you're feeling down on yourself for being depressed. Maybe you're feeling guilty for being depressed. And maybe you're feeling guilty that you can't get yourself to get up and do something. And so that's compounding on it. And so it's like you're just picking up that shovel and digging the hole deeper. Okay, so what is happening as far as your experiential control? How are you trying to make yourself feel better? Whether that's internally as a mental thing, whether that's externally as a comfort thing, but it's not working for you because it's keeping you stuck. I do like to prompt, what is the underlying fear? I often like to ask this people, what's underneath that? Is there a fear here? Often the fear is just a discomfort in some way. Does that look like fear? I'm gonna rewrite that. I don't know if you can read that. Fear. What's the underlying fear? Just the discomfort? The discomfort of is it the discomfort of having to get up and face the challenge and know it's going to be hard? That to actually like push push through the feeling that you're experiencing, to intentionally let go of whatever seeming comfort there is in the rumination or comfort that there is in the doing nothing, that the doing something is going to be harder. Is there a deeper fear? Is there a fear that you won't be able to succeed in some way, that you'll disappoint yourself, that you won't be able to keep it up? Disappointment, letdown. What do you think the fear is? I mean, I don't know. I'm just talking to myself here making a video. So this is you get the deeper stuff when you do this with another person. This is all hypothetical. Okay. And then what, I'm looking at the wrong prompt here. I'm scrolling on my screen right now. Uh, okay, and so then if this was the past, if you're reflecting on how you handled a past situation, then you might write about how did you respond? What were your actions? What were your thought processes? Like if you're writing about a past time that you were stuck in this place of low motivation, for instance, or whatever stuck point that you're thinking about, how did you respond to it? And then I like to use this arrow between avoidance and acceptance. Other words for these would be, over here would be the experiential control, and over here would be the willingness to have discomfort. This side is, I should use green. I think green would be a more fitting color for this. This side is values driven. This side is, I say, often fear driven, because it's often driven by the fleeing of discomfort. And where would you put yourself? Maybe where are you falling as you're thinking about it, or if you're processing the past, where would you put yourself on where how you handled the situation? If we're talking about feeling lethargic, depressed, down, and you just feel like staying in bed all day, your mind is telling you it's not worth it to get up. It'll only be worse if you get up. You're just gonna, whatever those thoughts are for staying in bed, then and you just stayed in bed, you might put yourself farther on the avoidance side, on the experiential control side. But if you maybe recognized it was happening and did some work to move towards what your values are and move towards some action, then maybe you put yourself somewhere farther over here. Or maybe you really leaned in, you actually allowed yourself to have those stuck thoughts, those hooking thoughts, and you observe them, and you recognize that a thought is simply a thought, and you can have a thought and you don't have to let that thought determine what your behavior is going to be. And you actually took action to get out of bed, and you got dressed, and you made yourself some breakfast or some coffee, and you picked out something you actually wanted to do that would be productive for the day, or maybe you went and saw someone or did some chores. And you did it even though it felt maybe very tiring and uncomfortable, and even as your mind is maybe telling you, what's the point in doing this, or just go back to bed. And you do it anyway though, and you pursue your values, because maybe that's how you want to be. Maybe you want to be the kind of person that pushes through the hard thing. And so maybe you could mark yourself over there on your avoidance acceptance arrow, and think about what values are at play here. What's what's important to you? How do you want to show up? How do you want to show up in the face of the hard things? Again, you could be thinking past, you could be thinking right in the present, you could be working through this. You could be in that tired, lethargic state working through this. But what matters to you? What kind of values come to mind? What kind of person do you want to be? What do you want your story to be today? Maybe I want to be productive. Maybe I want to spell right. Maybe I want to be productive. Maybe I also care about my self-care. So I don't just want to be productive. I want to take care of myself. Maybe, I don't know, maybe eating well, maybe being mindful. This is ACT after all, being mindful and present, maybe being courageous in the face of hard things. Maybe you want to be an active person. Maybe you used to be an active person, now you don't feel active anymore in the state that you're in, feeling stuck, feeling hooked, maybe in some low place. And okay, so what are the values that move you? Okay, these are aspirational. There's, let's say there's like, maybe I should make this a person. Okay, there's let's say how I live or how I act. There's that version. And then there's the aspirational me. And that's how I want to live. And we want to be more lined up with that version of ourselves, that version that we aspire to be. And I'd say we're never fully lined up with that. We're never probably never fully consistently living within our values. It's aspirational. Okay, I'm a Christian. My aspirational values would be to live like Christ, and I fall woefully short of that at various times. Okay, it's a lifelong aspirational aim, and it's never fully achieved. Not that you can't be living very much within one's values, but how consistent? I want to be more consistent. Or maybe there's things that aren't really values. Maybe there's things that I think are values that are not, that I would actually want to drop. But maybe something's been hammered into you as something that's important, but actually you think, well, maybe that's actually not important to me. And so your value would change. Maybe you learned to be hyper productive, and you go, you know what, I don't want to be hyper productive anymore. Maybe I want to be reasonably productive, and I want to nix this. Maybe I work too much and I want to step down from that. I want to be able to take care of myself more. Maybe I'm feeling lethargic because I burned myself out. And actually, my mind is then being hard on me that I need to be like hyper productive and doing things all the time. And so maybe I actually value slowing down more than speeding up. I want to be, what is that aspirational part that you're aiming for? And then, okay, if your thoughts and actions were driven by these values and not by fear, how would you handle this situation that you're in? Or if this is a past situation, how would you handle it next time? Okay, if you weren't driven by avoidance or fear, but rather by your values, what would you do? What would you do different? How would your inner world be different? How would your thought processes be different? How would you respond different to your thoughts and your emotions? To your thoughts and emotions. Okay, when you have a thought that You have the thought that tells you just like, stay in bed. It's not worth it. You won't feel better anyway. What's the point? How would you respond different to that stuff? How would you respond different if you were going, but wait a minute, this is how I want to live. I want to be reasonably productive, but I do want to slow down. I do want to take care of myself. Maybe I want to get up and eat well and take care of my body in that way, giving it the nutrition that it needs, and yet be mindful and present maybe as I do that, and be courageous in facing some of the hard things that I need to today. And I want to be an active person. Maybe I want to get out and move. Maybe I want to get out and see some people or do something. What would it look like to be doing this? Write it out here. What would that look like? So think about that. And then we're going to apply some of the ACT tools to this. What kind of tools can we use for this? So there's diffusion. And with diffusion comes the observing self, comes, I'm going to call it grounding, mindfulness. And these kind of skills are always going to be things you can come back to. And I'm going to call it these are really all intended as being part of an acceptance stance. And there's different ways of writing these things out. I like to recommend the happiness trap to people, and Russ Harris has some of his own terminology for this, but this is pretty common terminology. And then there's connecting with your values, which we're already doing here. And then what would the action? What would the values action? It's called ACT. ACT is about action. What can you do? And so the diffusion piece would be, what is a way that you could step back and observe this is happening? Like that is just a thought. I'm gonna make some room here. That is just a thought. I can have that thought. That is just a thought. That is just a feeling. And that's what the mind does. That's what the body does. It's a thought generating factory. It's a feeling generating machine. Our thoughts and our emotions are changing just as the weather changes. And so that weather outside changes, and yet I can have that and recognize that that doesn't change. No, that doesn't change the land. Like I'm the landscape and the weather changes, but I still stay the same. I still remain. Not a perfect analogy, but I can allow that weather change. I can allow myself to have those disempowering, those demotivating sorts of thoughts and emotions or even physical sensations. I can have them. I can observe that that's just my mind, my body doing what it does. I can step back and observe. And in my mind, this goes with the diffusion. These are very similar. I might do a diffusion thing to observe, and I like to have people do the either putting thoughts on on clouds. You might put a thought on a cloud. You might put it on a projector screen and just visualize that this thought is showing up. Just visualize like you're sitting in the audience of a movie theater, you're looking at the screen and you're putting the thought, I can't do this. I don't feel like doing this. I don't feel like doing anything today. It's not going to be worth it anyway. I'm just going to keep feeling this way. I just want to stay in bed. I can't figure out what to do. There's too much to do. It's overwhelming. You put all that onto the screen, and you might thank the mind. Thank you, mind. Thank you for all that, mind. I like that. I like that one. Thank you. Thanks, mind. Thanks for all that junk you're giving me right now. And then ground yourself. Okay, and so I like to do the five senses with that. That's my go-to. There's different ways of grounding. I don't like to complicate things. I used to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what are all different kinds of coping skills. I worked with kids in the elementary schools for a while, and it's like trying to think, oh, what are all different creative, different interesting coping skills. And it's like, man, you really only need a few things. That's in my perspective. There's really just a few things. And one of these is the five senses. So sight, smell, sound, taste, touch. Tune in to each one to bring yourself into the present. So ground yourself. You might be laying in bed, feeling demotivated, and yet you're observing that those thoughts are there. You're observing that those feelings are there. You're observing that this is a process that is happening. The point is to notice the process. The point is not, do not debate it. Okay, that would be, we're not doing CBT here. It's notice the process, don't debate it. Okay, you're just observing. Okay, then the values piece. What do you want to take action towards? If you weren't experiencing the negative junk that you're experiencing, And well, let me add this piece. As you're observing, the point is, whoops, backspace. The point is non-judgment. It's really not even to think of thoughts as negatives or positives, that just the thoughts are just thoughts and you're just observing them. But what are the positive actions that you want to take? Small, actionable, doing something. What can you do? And you're going to be doing it while you may still have those thoughts. Okay, it's like often I've heard this in trainings, like it's like the Nike phrase, it's like just do it. And there's a truth in that. And you work through the process in order to get to that point where you can do it. But at some point, you do have to determine to do something. You do have to determine to do the hard thing, and nobody else can make you do it. And so, what is the action step that you're going to take? And then, okay, I just want you to think about that. You're just going to think about what is that doing? And then you might visualize it. Can you picture yourself doing the thing? Can you picture yourself taking action? And then practice doing that. What does that look like? You think about your values. You allow yourself the acceptance stance that you're going to allow the discomfort to be there. You're going to allow the unwanted thoughts or emotions or physical sensations, whatever pain that might be, and yet you're going to do something anyway. Picture yourself doing that. Put it in your head. Think about what that would look like and what would it feel like? How would you feel afterwards? How would you feel to be doing that, to be accomplishing that, doing whatever the thing that may be? That might be just be you get out of bed, you get dressed, and you make yourself breakfast. And maybe that feels like the extent of what you can do. Maybe you aim higher than that. Maybe there's even more you do than that. And visualize, allow yourself to look at, to feel what it would be like to actually do that. And then the last piece is, what can you do to remind yourself to open up? What can you do to remind yourself to open up? To open up when when hooks show up. Okay, when when the discomfort comes. How can you open up to that? How can you open up? How can you lean in? How can you allow yourself to have discomfort and do the meaningful thing anyway? The meaningful, values driven action. You open up and do it anyway. How can you, what self-talk? What daily practices? How can you reinforce this? Journal, do some daily mindfulness. You can reflect on the things that hook you or your avoidance. How can you operationalize this into something that you're changing in your day-to-day life so that you can be more flexible? Okay, so I just worked through that process. Now I have all this essentially on one handout, but I just worked through it here, doing it in writing, so it took a lot more space, and I'm writing real big on the iPad. So does that make sense? I know I have to talk slower as I'm doing the writing, so I follow along with it. So what do you think of this process? If you use ACT, what would be other ways that you use ACT, whether with your clients or in your own life? Are there other ways that you would journal or self-reflect on applying ACT to a particular situation where you get stuck or hooked? Uh, I just kind of thought on this on the fly here to decide to do a video on this, working through this. I just discovered that I can have the camera on me and also on my iPad at the same time. So I wanted to experiment with that. So this is basically a trial run, and you've been here for it with me. So if you've actually stuck around to the end, thank you for watching. And I think I'll put the prompts here and the information part of the screen so you could practice them yourself if you like. And I'll think of other things to do here, but part of my purpose here is to give an impression, also of myself, right? This is to some degree a self-marketing thing. This is how I think, this is how I work, and so you get to experience that with me. So thanks for hanging out with me here as I work on showing you how to apply ACT as a journaling process, as a self-reflective process, and I'll see you next time. Please see the following disclaimer. The views on this channel are solely my own for educational purposes. They don't represent my employer or any other entity. The channel does not create a therapist-client relationship and does not constitute medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Any suggestions or recommendations are used at your own risk.